business, adventure. This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharp.
Today I'm really excited to hear from Michael what he's got to tell us about his role and the future of South Africa in politics. But before we get there, Michael, tell us about your background, your experience, your history. What gets you up in the morning? Who is Michael Louis?
Well, hi Kenneth, and thank you for just inviting me to this podcast. I've learned from the new generations the influence of podcasts, and what a privilege to be able to just share more my heart than anything else, because at the end of the day, it's not about the transformation of laws, but it's about a heart transformation.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that will come across in this interview. So I was brought up, obviously I'm a South African. I was brought up in a town called Bloemfontein, which
Beautiful
is
little town.
very small town. And I studied law, and but very blessed to obviously come from a history of entrepreneurs. We're actually a Lebanese family, and my grandfather came to South Africa in 1914. And the reason for coming is
How did he come, Michael? Did he come on the boat?
Well, I mean, he definitely came by boat,
Yes.
but I mean, that's partly what my drive is, because can you imagine he must have been on a boat, say, for 8 months to come and look for a better future for his next generation. And I often think about it in my quest for providing for a generational vision is, if my grandfather really traveled and gave up himself to travel 8 months to give a generation a better security, how can't I also give my time and energy to be able to provide for a generational legacy, not only for our own family, but for so many other millions of people. Mm. So I studied law. I really always loved constitutional law, but never did I ever think that I'll ever go into public service in government, because I come from an entrepreneurial family, and I must say to you and to those listening to this podcast, even till today, my father says to me, "But Michael, you've got just so much gifts and so many talents, and you can make so much money. Why don't you go and become a businessman?" But I think one of the first lessons that I've really learned, and that's what I would love to really convey as a first stake in the ground to the listeners of this podcast, you need to be authentic with what God has called you to be. It's not always the easiest, and I often think of those that want to become a nurse or become a teacher. It's not always easy to make those decisions, because sometimes your gifts and talents are much stronger and much bigger than that. And I'm even just thinking of the studio and those that are behind cameras. Maybe that's what you need to do, because that's where you're called to do. So definitely one of my greatest strengths is I'm 100% authentic in my calling to become a statesman. That's what I'm wanting to do, and that I'm very happy to fulfill.
We can see you comfortable in your skin, Michael. But I'm going to probe that skin deeper. So tell me, in the 80s, what was it like for you as a young man in this environment, and then going into the 90s when the changes started to happen in South Africa? How did that make you feel, and what role did you have in those changes?
Well, the big thing is most listeners won't ever understand it, because my black brothers and sisters also don't really understand it. But for some unknown reason in the 80s, growing up at white schools, privileged schools, we didn't really understand what was really happening, and it's something that I can't really explain, but I have to be authentic about it. I wasn't an activist in those years.
Yes.
And I think maybe coming from a Lebanese family, it was much more hidden, because we were international, and so it wasn't as real as that. But I must say, when I started going to university, I did start seeing the inequalities, but it was really on the 26th of December, 1993 only, when God really spoke to me about my calling. And then only it's as if the scales came down, and I realized, but I cannot accept what has happened in our country. And it was the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. I had a godly experience, and within 24 hours, I called my family together, And I said,
You were in business at that time, right?
I was, I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm not embarrassed.
Tell our listeners. It's an honest conversation.
Oh, Ken. No, so what actually happened is in my 20s, I was very blessed. I was heading up, I studied part-time my law because my father said, you need to realize that money doesn't come easy. And so I actually worked part-time. I actually worked in the day in our family business, and then I studied at night. But I also did my articles in a law firm to get my articles so that I could qualify quicker. And so at the age of 25, I was totally qualified. And I don't know, I was just blessed. At 26, I was heading corporations. I worked for SA Breweries on their property portfolio. I headed up about 45 shopping centers for 10 years of my life. And
so you gave up these 45 shopping centers to go into government?
Oh, well, I mean, more than that, because at the age of 28, I was asked to be the Gauteng head of Sanlam Properties. And I had about 45 billion rand that I had to look after, and I was 27, 28.
That's impressive.
And so I was really very fast-tracked.
This is the Phoenix Podcast with Ken Sharp.